There is a weapon that history refuses to forget. It is not a sword forged in a king's furnace. It is not a crown of gold or a banner of war. It is a simple iron lance, a standard issue tool of a Roman soldier, a piece of military equipment so ordinary that thousands like it once filled the racks of imperial armories from Britannia to Judea. And yet, this single lance, in one quiet, terrible moment outside the walls of Jerusalem, became the most feared object in the world. This is the story of the Holy Lance, the spear of destiny, the weapon that pierced the side of the Son of God. And from that moment forward, every general who heard of it wanted to hold it. Every emperor who learned of its legend tried to claim it. And every man who possessed it died. Some by poison, some by betrayal, some by their own hand. The pattern is too consistent to be coincidence. The deaths are too violent to be accident. There is something inside this lance that does not belong to this world. And tonight, we will follow its trail through 2,000 years of bloodshed. To understand the lance, you must first understand the soldier who carried it. The Romans called it the lancea. It was not a ceremonial weapon. It was not blessed. It was not special. It was issued. A standard auxiliary spear, roughly 6 feet in length, with a leaf-shaped iron tip and a wooden shaft of ash or oak. The men who carried it were not officers. They were auxiliaries. Soldiers recruited from the conquered provinces, often paid less, often given the worst posts. The man assigned to crucifixion duty outside Jerusalem on that Friday afternoon was such a soldier. The Gospel of John does not give him a name, but tradition gave him one: Longinus. The act itself was almost mechanical. After hours of suffering, the body of the condemned man hung still on the wood. The legs of the 2 thieves on either side had been broken to hasten their deaths, but when the soldiers came to the central cross, they saw that the man was already dead. To confirm the death, the auxiliary stepped forward. He raised his lance. He drove the iron tip upward, between the lower ribs, into the chest cavity. And then, the Gospel records, something the soldier did not expect. Out of the wound came blood and water. 2 distinct fluids. A separation that, in modern medicine, indicates the rupture of the pericardium and the pleural cavity, a sign of profound physical trauma sustained hours before. The Romans did not know this. The soldier only knew that he had stabbed a corpse, and the corpse had bled in a way no corpse should bleed. Sound effect: heavy iron piercing flesh, then a soft drip on stone. The legend says he looked up. The legend says the sky darkened. The legend says he spoke the words, "Truly, this man was the Son of God." And in that moment, the lance in his hand was no longer a piece of issued equipment. It had touched something the Romans had no category for. It had touched divinity itself. And the iron, it seems, remembered. Whether you believe the theology or not, the historical pattern that follows is undeniable. The lance disappears from the cross. And every time it surfaces again, in chronicles, in inventories, in the personal collections of warlords, the man who holds it begins to behave as though he believes the iron remembers too. The first man to write about the lance after the crucifixion was a soldier himself. His name does not survive. But by the 2nd century, the relic was already being spoken of in the early Christian communities of Jerusalem and Antioch. By the time Constantine, the first Christian emperor of Rome, sent his mother Helena to the Holy Land in the year 326 to gather relics, the lance was on her list. She returned with fragments: a piece of the cross, the nails, and, the records claim, the lance. From that moment on, the spear becomes an object of imperial fascination. Constantine kept it close to him. He carried fragments of it into battle, and his enemies, one by one, fell. This is where the legend begins to take its darker shape. Because Constantine was not the last emperor to believe that the lance carried something more than memory. The chronicles claim he held it before the Battle of the Milvian Bridge in the year 312. The chronicles claim he saw a vision in the sky, a burning cross above the sun, accompanied by words written in fire. The chronicles claim he won, and his army, vastly outnumbered, crushed the forces of Maxentius and changed the course of Western civilization in a single afternoon. From that day forward, a quiet rule began to take hold among the rulers of Europe. A rule never written down. A rule never spoken in public. A rule passed only in the quiet rooms of palaces, from one ruler to the next. The man who holds the lance does not lose. But the man who holds the lance does not live long either. The bargain is implicit. Victory in this world, payment in the next. The lance traveled. Through the fall of Rome, it moved north. Through the chaos of the centuries that followed, it changed hands. It surfaced in the court of the Byzantine emperors, locked away in Constantinople for generations. It surfaced in the treasuries of the Frankish kings, who carried it before them in golden processions. And in the 8th century, it came into the possession of a man who would become the most powerful ruler in Europe since the Caesars. Charlemagne. The chronicles of his reign are explicit. He carried the lance into battle. He believed in it absolutely. He fought 47 campaigns in his lifetime, and he won every one of them. From the forests of Saxony to the passes of the Pyrenees, from the plains of Lombardy to the river valleys of the Danube, his armies crushed every enemy that stood against them. And when he died, in his bed at the age of 72, the legend says he was holding the lance in his hands. Some chroniclers add a strange detail. They say he died on the same day he allowed the lance to be taken from him. They say his last words were a single phrase, repeated 3 times, but the scribes who recorded the death refused to write it down. After Charlemagne, the lance passed to his successors. To Otto I, to Henry IV, to Frederick Barbarossa. The same pattern repeats with each one. They held the lance. They won impossible battles. And they died strangely. Frederick Barbarossa, the most feared emperor of his age, drowned in a shallow river in Asia Minor on his way to the Holy Land. He was wearing his armor. The water was no deeper than his chest. His own knights could not explain it. The chronicles record that he had taken the lance with him on the campaign. The chronicles do not record what happened to it after he died. By the 11th century, a copy of the lance, or what was claimed to be the original, was being kept in the imperial treasury of the Holy Roman Empire in the city of Nuremberg. It rested there for centuries, locked in a vault, removed only for coronations. Each new emperor would touch it during the ceremony, as if confirming a contract written in iron. And during all those centuries, no foreign army successfully invaded the German heartland. Coincidence, the historians say. Pattern, the believers say. The lance does not care which word you use. It simply waits. There is a story from the First Crusade that the chroniclers struggled to explain. The year was 1098. The Crusader army, exhausted, starving, surrounded inside the city of Antioch by a vastly superior Muslim force, was on the verge of annihilation. The men had not eaten in days. The horses were dying. The walls would not hold. And then a poor pilgrim named Peter Bartholomew came forward. He claimed that Saint Andrew had appeared to him in a vision. He claimed that the lance that pierced Christ, was buried beneath the floor of the Cathedral of St. Peter inside the city. The Crusader leaders dug. 4 hours, they dug. And then, at the bottom of the pit, they pulled out an iron lance head. The men carried it through the streets. They lifted it above their heads. They marched out of the gates of Antioch the next morning, 8,000 starving men, and they attacked an army of more than 30,000. The Muslim forces broke. The siege was lifted. The First Crusade was saved. The chroniclers who survived wrote that they saw a host of warriors riding behind the Crusader army that day, riding on white horses, dressed in white. Whether you believe in visions or in mass hysteria, the military fact remains. A starving, broken army won a battle it should not have won. And it had been carrying the lance. But the lance does not give without taking. Peter Bartholomew, the pilgrim who had revealed the relic, was accused by some of the Crusader nobles of having faked the vision. To prove his honesty, he agreed to walk through fire. He walked the gauntlet of flames in front of the entire army. He emerged on the other side, badly burned. 12 days later, he was dead. The lance, the chroniclers said, was no longer in his hands. For the next several hundred years, the lance, or claimants to be the lance, multiplied across Europe. There was the Vienna lance, kept by the Habsburgs in the imperial treasury. There was the Vatican lance, kept in the Basilica of St. Peter in Rome. There was the Echmidzin lance, kept by the Armenian Apostolic Church. And there was the Antioch lance, which had vanished after the Crusades. Scholars have debated for 900 years which one is genuine, whether any of them is genuine. But the pattern continues. Every man who has held one has felt something, and many of them have died. In the year 1796, a young general from Corsica with a strange light in his eyes invaded northern Italy. He was 26 years old. He had no royal blood. He had no fortune. He had only an army and an obsession. His name was Napoleon Bonaparte, and in his correspondence, his agents made repeated, urgent requests for the location of the lance. He believed in it. He hunted for it. He was told that it was in the imperial treasury of Vienna, behind the walls of the Habsburg Empire, beyond his reach. He fought to take Vienna. He nearly succeeded. But the lance was moved. It was hidden in Nuremberg. And every time Napoleon advanced toward Nuremberg, the city was emptied, the relic moved again, always one step ahead of him. Napoleon fought 60 major battles. He won 53 of them. But he never held the lance. And in 1815, at Waterloo, the man who had crowned himself emperor of half of Europe was destroyed in a single afternoon. He died in exile on a small island in the South Atlantic, at the age of 51, of stomach cancer. Or, some say, of arsenic poisoning. The cause is still debated. What is not debated is the words he reportedly said in his final hours. He spoke of armies. He spoke of battles. And, in one fragmentary record, he spoke of the lance. The story might have ended there. A relic, a legend, a string of dead emperors. But in the year 1908, a young man walked into the Hofburg Imperial Palace in Vienna. He was 20 years old. He was poor. He was a failed art student, twice rejected by the Academy of Fine Arts. He stood in front of the glass case that held the imperial regalia of the Holy Roman Empire. He stood for hours, motionless, ignoring the other visitors, ignoring the guards. He wrote in his journals later that he had felt something he could not explain. He felt that the lance recognized him. He felt that it was waiting for him. He felt that the entire room was vibrating at a frequency only he could hear. He returned the next day, and the next. The young man's name was Adolf Hitler. Hitler returned to Vienna again and again over the following years. He read every book on the lance he could find. He spoke about it to his closest associates. He believed, with absolute conviction, that the man who held the spear that had pierced Christ would rule the world. When Germany annexed Austria in 1938, one of the first acts of the Nazi regime was the seizure of the Vienna lance. It was transported, under heavy guard, to the city of Nuremberg, to the same vault that had held it for centuries before. And there it stayed, while Hitler waged a war against the world. The pattern repeats one more time. For nearly 7 years, Hitler's armies were unstoppable. They crushed Poland in weeks. They overran France in a month. They drove the British army into the sea at Dunkirk. They reached the gates of Moscow. They stood on the cliffs of Calais and looked across the Channel at England. The lance, the men who knew about it whispered, was working. And then, on the afternoon of April 30th, 1945, an American lieutenant named Walter William Horn, leading a unit of soldiers through the wreckage of Nuremberg, descended into a hidden vault beneath the city. He pulled out, from a stone niche, a small wooden case. Inside the case was the lance. The hour of the lance's recovery was, according to the official report, around 2:30 in the afternoon, Central European Time. At 3:30 in the afternoon, Berlin time, in a bunker beneath the chancellery of the German Reich, Adolf Hitler placed a pistol against his head. He pulled the trigger. He died within an hour of losing the lance. The historians can call it coincidence. They have called it coincidence for 80 years. But the pattern, by now, is too long to dismiss. The lance was returned to Vienna by the Americans. It rests there to this day, locked in a glass case, guarded, watched. But the question that still troubles the men who study these things is the same question that has troubled them for 2,000 years. What is inside that piece of iron? Modern metallurgical analysis has been performed on the Vienna lance. The results are strange. The blade dates, by some estimates, to the 7th or 8th century. Too late to be the original. But embedded inside the iron of the blade, archaeologists have found a small spike of older metal, bound with a band of darker iron, fixed in place with golden thread. The spike has been dated, by some teams, to the 1st century. The era of the crucifixion. The exact era. And no one, in any of the studies, has been able to explain how that older fragment came to be inside a younger blade, or why it was placed there, or what it once belonged to. The Bible itself does not say what happened to the lance. The Gospel of John records the act. The other Gospels do not mention it. The early Christian writers spoke of relics, but their accounts are fragmentary. The book of the Apocalypse, the final book of the Bible, written by the same disciple who recorded the lance in his Gospel, contains a strange passage. It speaks of weapons in the hands of kings. It speaks of iron rods. It speaks of a final battle in which the heavens themselves open, and a rider on a white horse comes forth, holding a sword. The early commentators sometimes asked whether the sword and the lance were related, whether the iron that pierced the sun once would not be the iron that returns when he comes again. The Bible does not answer this question, but it does not deny it either. There are men today who believe the lance in Vienna is not the original. There are men today who believe the original was hidden somewhere in the foundations of the Antarctic in the final months of the war. There are men today who believe it was taken to South America. There are men today who believe it was taken to a hidden vault in the mountains of Bavaria, sealed there by SS officers in the last days of the Reich, and that no one has found it since. Each of these theories has its own evidence. Each of these theories has been pursued by historians and by less reputable men with less reputable funding. None of these theories has been proven, but there is something in the pattern of the lance that suggests its story is not finished. Because every time it has gone missing, in 2,000 years, it has reappeared. In the hands of an emperor. In the hands of a conqueror. In the hands of a man who believed that the iron that touched the side of Christ would give him dominion over the world. And every time, without exception, that man has died. Sometimes in glory. Sometimes in shame. Sometimes in fire. Sometimes in poison. Sometimes by his own hand in a bunker beneath a burning city. The lance does not care. The lance does not choose its bearers, the chroniclers say. The bearers choose the lance. And in choosing it, they sign their own ending. What does this mean for us? We who do not command armies. We who will never stand in a Vienna palace and feel the iron pull at us through the glass. The pattern of the lance is not really about generals. It is not really about empires. It is about the human appetite for power. The lance is a mirror. It shows the man who looks at it what is already inside him. The conqueror sees a path to victory. The fanatic sees a sign of destiny. The thief sees a treasure. And every one of them, in time, sees their own death. Because the lance was never meant to be a weapon of human ambition. It was the iron that confirmed a death that broke the world open. And every man who has tried to use it for less than that has been broken by it instead. The Gospel records that when the lance entered the side of Christ, blood and water flowed out. The early church fathers, writing in the 2nd and 3rd centuries, said that the blood and the water were the first sacraments. The blood was the cup of the Eucharist. The water was the water of baptism. They said that from the side of the dying Christ, the church itself was born. The lance, in this reading, is not cursed. It is consecrated. It is the instrument that opened the door between two worlds. And the men who have tried to seize it for power have failed not because the lance hates them, but because it does not belong to them. It belongs to the moment it touched. And the moment it touched, the chroniclers say, has not yet finished happening. There are still scholars, today, working in the climate-controlled archives of Vienna and the Vatican, examining records that have not been opened in centuries. There are still secret committees, formed by governments and by religious orders, whose membership is not publicly disclosed. There are still men, in private collections, in unmarked vaults, who claim to possess fragments of the original lance. None of these claims can be verified, but none of them can be entirely dismissed either. The lance has a way of generating its own followers. It has a way of finding the people who want it. And the historians who have spent their lives studying it agree on one thing. Every generation, without fail, produces a new man who believes that the iron will give him what he wants. And every generation, without fail, that man is wrong. We have come to the end of the trail. From the dust outside Jerusalem to the bunkers of Berlin. From a single Roman soldier following orders to the most powerful empires the world has ever known. The lance has watched them rise. The lance has watched them fall. The iron does not change. The iron does not age. The iron does not forget the moment it pierced something it should never have been able to touch. And somewhere in Vienna tonight, behind glass, beneath the eyes of guards who have replaced one another for generations, the lance waits. For what? No one knows. For whom? No one knows. But if the pattern holds, and the pattern always holds, then the next man to reach for it has not yet been born. Or perhaps he has. Perhaps he is already alive. Perhaps he is reading the same histories that you have just heard. Perhaps, somewhere in the world tonight, a quiet ambition is forming in a quiet room. And the lance, in its case, is beginning, very slowly, to wake up.